and welcome to Lorraine Style, where I design, draft, sew, and go. I'm Lorraine. Today, I'm going to show you how to take accurate bodice measurements. If you're new to pattern drafting or you need to alter a commercial pattern, it's important that you take the measurements accurately so that the bodice will fit the way that you want.
For example, you may have gaping around the neckline or the armholes of the bodice, again, due to inaccurate measurement techniques. And so we want to hone in on that today. This series will also cover, in addition to the bodice, we're going to cover the sleeves, we'll do the skirt, and we'll do the pant measurements in different videos. So, but there's a total of 4. Pants are a big issue. We'll save that for last. So um, today, we're going to focus on the bodice, taking those accurate measurements. We'll hope to eliminate the gaping necklines and the armholes. So stick with me. Be right back.
So getting started, you're going to need to wear a leotard, bodysuit, or tight-fitting garment. Nothing with thick fabric or baggy. We need tight fitting so that we can take accurate body measurements. You're going to need a good tape measure that is not stretched out of shape. And you're going to need a second pair of hands because it's difficult to take the back measurements all by yourself. Unless you're a contortionist, and then I wouldn't even trust those measurements. You're also going to need a way to log the measurements as you take them. Now, in my guide, I include worksheets. It lists the measurements that you're taking, and they're all numbered, and then you put your measurements here as you take them. If you're doing your own pattern drafting, you would add your ease here, and that would give you your total there.
You have everything you need. Also use these for clients. Just put their name at the top and the date that I took the measurements, and I can use that to refer when I'm making things for them. And you want to get in the habit of maybe updating these every 6 months or so because our bodies change. We gain weight, we lose weight. Gravity, has something to say about where things are. So get in the habit of every 6 months or so. Checking these measurements. Okay. So here's the ebook that I mentioned, Pattern Drafting for Women. It goes step by step with the measurements. So, for example, if we're taking the bodice measurements, which we're doing right now, it's got slots over here for you to record those measurements as you take them. We've got a column for ease that you need to add to your measurements in your pattern drafting to give you a total. So everything is there. Of course, you can make as many copies as you want. Comes in handy, or you may want to do it in your Excel spreadsheet or on a notepad or a piece of paper, which you can easily lose. But yeah, up to you. So we're going to start with the upper torso circumference. Let's start with the neck. We'll measure around the upper part of the neck and divide that number by 5 and put that number on our worksheet. We'll do the upper bust, and we're doing torso circumference, meaning we're going around the torso, okay? So upper bust, we're going to measure around the back and the front above the bust. For the upper bust, we want to measure the bust itself around the bust, front and back, and then under bust, which is under the bust, around front and back. And you want to make sure that the tape measure is snug but not tight. Okay, again, we want to take accurate measurements. We don't want those measurements distorted. Okay, and then we want to do the waist, measure around the front and back waist. Torso circumference measurements, upper torso, we're only doing because we're focusing on the bodice. The other measurement with weight, because there's a waist arc and a waist and a hip and a high hip. Yeah, but that's for the skirt and the pants when we get there. So for upper torso, we're just doing these. We're doing the neck, upper bust, bust, under bust, and waist circumference. So one around. Okay, we're going to start with the upper torso horizontal, front. We will do a cross shoulder, measuring from the shoulder tip across to the center front neck. There's a hollow at our neck here usually. And so we go from the shoulder tip to that hollow point of the neck. That's our cross shoulder. We want to do our bust arc, meaning we'll measure starting at the center front and measure over the bust, ending 2 inches below the armpit. There, okay? We want to do bust span. We place the tape measure at one bust point and measure over to the other bust point. So from nipple to nipple, then we take that measurement and divide it by 2, divide it in half to get our bust span. Then we want our shoulder length. Now this is different from a cross shoulder. Shoulder length, we're going to measure from the shoulder tip to the shoulder neck right there. Okay, it's tip to neck. This went from shoulder tip to center front neck, the hollow point. This is going from the side shoulder neck joint to the shoulder tip. Okay, and then we want to do a cross chest. We would measure from the center front, again, that imaginary line, to 1 inch above the mid armhole there. So from center front to there for that across chest measurement. Upper torso horizontal, front still. We're going to do our waist arc. Again, we start from that imaginary center front line and measure over to the side waist. That gives us the waist arc. We want our dart placement. We would measure from the center front waistline to the side front along the waist at the princess seam line. So from here to there. You say, yeah, but how do we know where the princess seam line is? Yeah, good question. So here, what we want to do, you want to get your center front and measure over to the side front. Divide that by 2. That's going to give you your dart placement measurement. So for example, if it's 6 here, then we would go 3 inches from the center front, 3 inches over, and that would be our dart placement. Now, when you're drafting your patterns, usually the instructions will tell you where you should put your dart placement mark. For example, for a size 8, I think it may be 3 1/4 from the center front over 3 1/4. That would be your dart placement. That's where your waist dart is going to go. The first leg of it anyway. The second will be somewhere over here. But that's where your dart placement, that's what it's for. Now, usually it's half the distance of your shoulder length. So if the shoulder length is 5 1/2 or 5, you divide it by 2, is 2 1/2. You measure 2 1/2 over and then down, and that's where your dart placement will be. But typically, you'll have that information in your instructions, drafting instructions. So horizontal upper back. Again, still on the torso, we want to do the back neck. That goes from the side neck joint to the center back neck. There's a little knob back there, a little bumpy thing. That's your center back. You want to measure that. We do across the back shoulder. We're replicating the same measurements more or less that we did for the front with 1 or 2 minor changes. So across back shoulder, we start at the shoulder tip here and measure to the center back, that little knobby part. Across back, we'll measure from the center back here to 1 inch above the mid armhole. Now on the front, I think we went 2 inches below, but here on the back, we'll start at the center back and go 1 inch above the mid armhole there. Okay. And then our back arc, we'll measure from the center back to the bottom of the armpit. So center back, the bottom of the armpit there. Okay, continuing with the back, we want to do our waist arc. Waist arc, we measure from the center back waist to the side waist. Dart placement, same as the front. Go from the center back to the side, divide that by 2, and then measure that amount from the center back, and that's our dart placement. And I mentioned torso arcs. It's just taking a section of the torso. This is a side view, for example. Remember we did the circumference, we went around. With the torso, we're just doing a quarter section. So like from the front to the side. Front to the side. We did that for the back arc and the bust arc. And then we talked about princess seam lines. We've got what's called a shoulder princess seam, meaning it starts from the shoulder and goes down along that dart placement line. And it's usually half the distance from the shoulder tip to the neck, the shoulder length. Divide that by 2, and the center, that would be the center point for the princess seam line, shoulder princess seam. And then for the mid armhole, we would start from the mid armhole, then down over the bust to the waist for the armhole, mid armhole princess seam. So shoulder, mid armhole. Now we'll look at the vertical side. We want to do the bust depth. We measure from the shoulder tip down to the bust point. That's the depth. We want to do the bust radius. We measure around the mound to the rib cage there, ending at the rib cage. That's our bust radius. Then we have our side length. We don't want to measure starting right under the arm at the armpit. We want to start a ½ inch down to an inch below the armpit and then measure down to the side waist for our side length. Okay, so don't start right up under the armpit. You do that, you don't give yourself enough space to move. Can't articulate the arm. The fabric is all bunched up under the arm. So we don't want it to be too high and we don't want it to be too low. So anywhere from a ½ inch to an inch, depending on the fleshiness of your arm, for your side length. Do the torso vertical front. We'll do the full length. We start from the shoulder neck down to the waist. We'll do the mid armhole, measure from the shoulder tip to the bottom of the armpit and divide that number in half. And use your mid armhole. Want to do center length, we would start from the hollow point at the front neck down to the waist, straight down. Over the bust, straight down. Okay, new strap. We would measure from the shoulder neck to the side waist at the side of the bust mound. We're not going to go over the bust, we're going to go to the side of it. Okay, like that. Shoulder, neck, down to the waist. And then we will do our shoulder slope. We would start from the shoulder tip in a diagonal line to the center front waist. That way. And on the shoulder tip, we want to make sure that we measure both the right and the left shoulder slope. So measure on the right side from the shoulder tip down to the waist and left shoulder tip down to the waist. And we want to do that on the front and back shoulder strips. And we do that because sometimes our bodies are not symmetrical, meaning they're not even. So if there's a variance of 1/8 of an inch or more, then your body is asymmetric at the shoulders. Okay, one is a little higher than the other, and you would draft your pattern to accommodate that variance. Okay, torso back, basically same as the front. We do the full length from the shoulder neck down to the center back waist. Mid armhole, measure from shoulder down to the end of the arm side, the armpit, divide that in half. Center length would go from the center back neck down to the waist. Shoulder slope, shoulder tip diagonally to the center back waist on both sides, again, as I said, because if there's a variance, we need to accommodate that when we are drafting our pattern. Armhole depth. I'm going to touch on it here because it's part of the bodice. We, have an arm up there. We need to accommodate it. So armhole depth, we would measure from the shoulder tip to the bottom of the armpit or the arm side at the side seam. Okay, shoulder tip down. Remember, I said before, when we're measuring from the side waist for the side length, we want to start a ½ inch to an inch below that arm side armpit so that it's not bunched up under there and it's not so tight that we can't move our arm. The armhole depth, there are other measurements involved that I'm not going to cover here. I'm just giving you a heads up to come. We will discuss them when we're doing the sleeve, okay, because we have to make allowances for the sleeve cap, and we want to be able to move that arm front and back and side without restriction. And you certainly don't want your seams popping. So just remember armhole depth. I've got a note here, and it's also in the book, like for cap height, use armhole depth measurement. Then you want to add like 3/8 of an inch, depending on the size. Sometimes it's a ½ inch, whatever. We'll cover that later. Just let you know that just the armhole depth itself is not enough when we're working with sleeves and jackets. So armhole depth, measure from the shoulder tip to the bottom of the armpit at the side seam. Okay, so in my guide, we take the measurements step by step as we're doing in the series, the video series. There's 4. We've got the bodice, sleeves, skirt, and pants. There's worksheets to accommodate you as you're taking the measurements, and they're numbered, so you'll just follow along step by step. You put your measurements here, add your ease, and that would give you your total so that when you're drafting your patterns, you have those measurements on hand. You don't have to go back and try to measure again, or, oh my, what did I do with them? You should keep them handy to record your measurements on. Okay, and so that's it for the bodice, how to take accurate measurements for the bodice.
Now, in the guide, we take the measurements step by step.
As we're doing in the series, the video series, there's 4. We've got the bodice, sleeves, skirt, and pants. There's worksheets to accommodate you as you're taking the measurements, and they're numbered, so you'll just follow along step by step. You put your measurements here, add your ease, and that would give you your total so that when you're drafting your patterns, you have those measurements on hand. You don't have to go back and hit the notification bell so that you're notified when the next videos are released. And next one again will be skirt fit problems, bulging or too tight across the hips. We're going to learn how to take accurate measurements to.
Okay, so that's a wrap for the first part of a 4-part series. This one was how to take accurate bodice measurements. The next video will be on how to take accurate skirt measurements. So if you've been having trouble fitting your skirts, you don't want to miss this exciting episode. Then there would be 2 left in this series. The next one after the skirt would be how to take accurate arm measurements to solve your sleeve fitting problems. And then last, how to take accurate pants measurements, which is a biggie, so I saved it for last. So now might be a good time for you to think about subscribing to my channel so that you don't miss any of these exciting episodes. Wait for it. I want to thank you for watching and have a fantastic day.